Welcome, Mark Carson and Timmie Baudier from Carson Station to the Musician's Mentor podcast. I know that we briefly just, spoke about a few things before we were hitting record. And I'm so excited to talk to you both. I know that I've not actually met either of you in person, but Mark, it's quite interesting because a mutual friend of ours, Pat Gale,
Right.
man, he hits me up all the time. He's like, you got to talk to Mark. You got to talk to Mark. And I'm like, Pat, I'm working on it, bro. So
Yeah,
so it's great to have you finally here.
it's
We're
great.
gonna jump straight in. And what I do with all of my guests, as weird or bizarre as this might come across to you, is I ask for a bit of a brief introduction on you. Now I know that it's interesting because there's two of you. So we're gonna have to take turns with this because otherwise it might just get all cluttered.
Sure.
But if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to kind of ask a few questions here. Would you both please do a little bit of a brief introduction on yourselves? Tell me about how you got involved in the music industry, and more kind of prominent to the conversation we're going to have today, tell me how you guys started working together in Carson Station.
Okay. Well, I'm Mark Carson, and I've been writing music and just being involved in music since I was a kid. I remember and one of the things that actually gets referenced in the the song, the album "Goes to New Orleans." Uh, is basically when I was a kid, I remember my mom and my aunt dragging us down to the quarter, the French Quarter, and I heard my first Dixieland band. And the whole kind of all the instruments playing together with, but still nobody's stepping on each other. It's all this big, uh, joyous sound. I don't know. It was like, when anybody who's ever played any instruments, when if a little kid comes up and watches the band and they're like, their eyes would get big as saw. That's what my experience was. And so ever since then, I've been trying to chase those kinds of moments with
Yeah.
music. So it's just that's how I kind of got on to wanting to do this, you know. Um, we Timmy and I have been playing what 20, 30 years or
Probably
something like that.
older,
Yeah.
longer than
That
we care to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Long time.
well over 20 years,
So we
30
were in
years.
other
Yeah,
bands
30 years.
together before Carson Station. And so uh, you know, one of the reasons why I think that uh, we put together Carson Station is that we've been Timmy and I and another guy, Rick Rooney, had been writing songs for years. Had all these songs stockpiled. Plus, I was a staff writer in Nashville for a couple of years, 2 3 years, and so we had this overwhelming large number of songs, and it was like we didn't have a vehicle to play these songs. And so we started Carson Station in order to do that, and got a couple of other guys to join us, and it's been a fun little ride. So
that's awesome.
All right. Well, so for me, Timmie Baudier is my name. I I think my earliest memory of getting the music bug was watching the Glenn Campbell show as a kid, as a tot or whatever. Watching this guy play the guitar, saying, "I think I want to do that one day." Got a guitar, early teens, played in high school. It was one of those situations where I was in a band in high school that had a little bit of success, mostly covers, did a couple of originals, and we got to the point where we could play clubs, but some of us in the band were like 15 years old. So, it was one of those, well, you can play, but you can't drink, and this is New Orleans. So legal drinking age was 18 and kids were drinking at 16. And of course, that led to some early memories of playing in bars as a kid. But, over the years, I had a regular uh, job with the government, which I won't talk too much about because I'd have to kill everybody. But
Yeah, that sounds fair.
it's actually much more boring than that. But no, just different stints of subbing for different working bands. I still sub for a few of the New Orleans top a couple of New Orleans top working bands have some of those gigs coming up. But yeah, playing with Mark in some of those bands and just wanting a separate outlet, and then getting to have an outlet for my own songwriting bug and having somebody to co-write with, and being able to play these songs out. I mean, it kind of grew legs on its own, and putting a band together with people you respect, having some other good musicians playing your songs, and eventually getting in the studio. That's all gravy to me, So yeah, I love writing. I love playing guitar. I just love being part of the whole ensemble thing, and making things sound good together.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
We are gonna talk about a few band things there on just that introduction.
Sure.
We'll get to it, but there's a few things like I love camaraderie and chemistry, and I think it's so important in bands.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are living in such a interesting time with music now where it's so focused on, the artist, which is great, but like no one even knows that bands are actually these working, moving parts, it
Right.
seems. And chemistry is something that I get into with a lot of the guests, in that some of these artist type frontmen, frontwoman kind of figures, I've seen it where they think that things are going to be the same even if you replace all the members, and it's
Right.
not.
Yeah.
The chemistry changes.
Right.
So we'll get to that. I'd love to talk about that, but let's try to get through a few other things first.
Sure.
Okay.
So Mark, I want to start with you. I mean, you mentioned the staff writer thing there. I read your bio. I went through some of your credits and stuff. You got some impressive stuff going on as a writer. Now, you mentioned that you were constantly trying to chase that feeling of like the wide-eyed kid who's like seeing this joy or hearing this joy.
Yeah.
And so you might have answered this already, but in a nutshell, tell me how you really started getting into songwriting. Like when was the moment that you thought, well, I'm not just making these like little things up anymore. I can take this serious and do something with it. And once that moment happens, would you mind maybe breaking down for us how you go from that into getting into a position where you're getting your songs recorded by like artists like Papa Gross and Chapel Hearts and so many others?
Yeah. Well, for about 20 years, I wrote songs by myself. So, you'd have the song, you'd put together the melody, you put together the lyrics, you type out the lyric sheet, and, then what do you have? You have really what you have is the first draft of a song. But I always thought, okay, yeah, let's do that. And so we one of the early incarnations of Timmie and I doing original music is we'd play at these coffee houses, and we'd and people were ignoring us, and teenagers were trying to hook up, and we were just sitting there, and alcoholics were there just because there was coffee there, and so they were drinking shooting coffee like it was alcohol. So it wasn't the perfect thing, but I just we wrote a lot of songs that weren't geared towards an audience, more geared towards what we wanted to do. Now, I went to graduate school. I have a PhD in history. I teach history, and so during that phase, a friend of mine, Jim McCormick, who was a three number ones in country radio, and Grammy nominee, all that kind of stuff. He's from here, and the first person I co-wrote with ever was Jim McCormick. So I kind of followed what he was doing, and it was like, wow, that's really cool. You're getting to meet all these people. You're writing with Luke Bryan. You're doing all these and Tim McGraw, and had a cut from Tim McGraw, and so on and so forth. And so I always kind of played with the idea of whether or not I should do this and try to make it a career rather than just, something that I do. It's still not a career as far as money wise, but yeah. So, Jim had a house in Nashville, and he had this guy Chris, who was his mentor, And I got this call, and this guy's this old school lyricist. He'd been there forever, you know. And so he was like, "Come on up, see what you can do," and all that. So they started hooking me up with some writers, and before then I wrote mostly by myself. But when I started collaborating, the whole world started to open up, because it wasn't just my point of view. It was other people's point of view. It was other people's music, other people's lyrics, other people's ideas.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of fell in love with the whole collaborate, and I hardly ever write by myself anymore.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so through that, I was not a country music guy. I was like more, grew up listening to Elton John, Billy Joel, all those kinds of singer-songwriter types. And so when I got there, I had to relearn. Like, I'd already written like 150 songs, but I had to relearn how to write for this audience. And I think the idea came when I actually said, okay, it's not about, okay, oh, this is cool, this is a cool chord. It's like, what is an audience going to like?
Yeah.
And it's not selling out, because we still wanted to have songs that meant something to us. But the idea is, you have to kind of, and I do this, I teach songwriting at Tulane, and basically I tell the kids, don't just write the song, write, certainly go through the creative process, but basically have in your mind that you're going to be singing this or playing this for somebody. And so that was kind of when I started going to Nashville. That was, when I made the decision to do that. That was kind of when I started to actually try to see if I could have some sort of career in songwriting.
Career, yeah. And Timmie, I mean, what about you? You're pretty prominent on the new Carson Station record, both as a co-writer, even as a co-producer. You told me a little bit about your upbringing in the intro there, but what about you? How did you get into writing? And were you also a similar journey? Were you writing by yourself before you guys started writing together?
Yeah, I mean, I always dabbled in writing, and then I guess in the early days of doing that, I either thought what I had wasn't good enough to share, or it wasn't complete. But I kept at it, and I did have a few experiences co-writing with different people, and for some of that, it was kind of like you have your baby and you have a vision, and then you start co-writing and it goes off in a different direction. And for me, it was kind of scary, like that's not where I wanted it to go. Like, so I had some good experience doing that, and then I had some experience where like I kind of felt like I lost some creative control, or the dynamic wasn't there. And then so Mark was primarily writing a lot more stuff when we got together, and he was just always really encouraging, hey, if you have any stuff that you write, you want to share, it's okay if it's not finished, we can work, and so finally I had a few things that I thought were close to finished products that I felt, and then Mark was really encouraging, and some of them there were a couple where he's like, look, that's a finished song. There's nothing really wrong with that. And there were others where, let's work with this. Let's do something. So it was really a different, it kind of depends on the dynamic. I mean, I think, Mark knows how to walk that line, how to encourage and throw things in there, but realizing if you got the seed of an idea and you have some vision, maybe let it go where it's going to go, or offer some suggestions, but not kind of take over the process. Because some people who have a really strong vision or something they want to do, that they'll kind of latch on and take it in a different direction. So that personality wise, that worked for me and just encouraged me to write more. And I primarily write with him and our buddy Rick. I have a lot of stuff I write on the side that's more guitar. If I ever come out with a guitar album, maybe by the time I'm 80 or 90, I'll have
guitar's gonna be stuff back by then.
Yeah, right. right. Yeah, right. But I still keep a lot of ideas. I really just, and it happens different. Sometimes I come up with a theme and I just start writing some lyrics, no music at all. But a lot of times I like to just try to record. I like to just dabble on the guitar. I'm not very good with structured practice. I try to do some of that, but a lot of times I'm just messing around, and sometimes I come across something and I'm like, I'm going to record this on my phone. And then over time, I get all these little bits and pieces,
Of
and
course.
that's where some of these riffs come from, you know.
Yeah.
So, and
So
sometimes I listen back and I'm like, no, it doesn't do anything for me. Other times it's like, hey, this sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Let me ask you what some might perceive as possibly a stupid question, but I actually don't think it's a stupid question because truthfully, some people have no idea where to start. So in regards to songwriting, if somebody's listening to this and they're interested in the art of songwriting, but haven't got a clue, right? Like, I'd love to write a song, but I don't think I could. I'd love to write a song. I don't know how. Oh, I don't play an instrument. Where would you advise those types of people on starting?
Well, uh, as I said, I teach a class at Tulane, and I don't require that anybody have any kind of experience songwriting. So I give them a little survey in the beginning, and I said, "Have you ever written a song?" And there's a number of them that haven't written a song or only wrote one. They're all 18-year-old kids, but so they took the class and they're enthusiastic about songwriting, but they're not music majors or any of this. And so what I often try to get them to do is to put down or try to write 5 original titles, from stuff that they've read, from their experience, whatever it is, and that really helped me when I started to try to write songs professionally. Is I used to keep it what they now in Nashville they call it a hook book. You come up with these various titles and what could this song be about, and try to write that, and then think of 3 different ways to write these songs, those kinds of things. And so you start to kind of develop your own style of putting things together. Now there's no, you could do it with the way Timmie said, you have a guitar lick and okay, is this a song? That's fine. You can do it musically. I came from a more of a lyrical type of thing to get started, but I think that's a really good start. If you know nothing and but you're really interested, you play an instrument or you don't, start off with the ideas, see if you can get some ideas and put those together, and then just keep building. And as I say, I teach songwriting. I don't teach songwriting. I teach them what I did, basically songwriting, you learn how to do it by doing it, and so it's just like, there's one, the guy that's wrote Wichita Lineman, and I can't remember those other Glenn Campbell guys. Jimmy Webb. Yeah. Jimmy Webb got a publishing deal, and he went to his first co-write at this publishing company. And up at the top, there's a sign that said, there are no mistakes here. And he froze because he thought, oh shoot, I make mistakes all the time. He's like, no. In the creative process, you just let it go. There are no mistakes. And that's what I would suggest. You dare to suck,
Yeah.
because you're gonna suck in the beginning. And so you just go and just put your blinders on and just be creative. Don't, sometimes it's easier when you do it by yourself. Sometimes it's when you have a co-writer. So, some of the co-writers I've had, they're like, they stop the process. Oh, no, does that chord go to this? No. Let's just do it for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Get this whole thing out. So yeah, dare to suck.
That's kind of like great advice.
Yeah.
And I would just say they're the only, as Mark probably already pointed out, the only formula there is no formula, right? Because if there was,
everybody,
it would be easy. Right?
Yeah, and the same can be said for music careers, right? Like there's
Right.
so many different paths, and people can teach music careers all day long, but the truth is, like, this guy will go viral, or that guy does it the old way, or this guy puts out a release that just happens to touch
Right.
people's hearts. It's like,
Right.
it's so fascinating for me, you know?
So the only thing else I would add, if you're more lyrically driven, yeah, if that's what drives you, I guess try starting with the lyric or a title or just the theme. And if you're more, I
Music.
guess if you're more inclined to hear musical hooks or musical melodies, then yes, start with that. If you're an instrumentalist,
Stockpile.
dabble in ideas and just record stuff and put it away and listen to it later. You know, you might find something you like. That's all I got on that.
Yeah. Okay. I want to dive deep into the music business and some philosophies and things like that. But before we do, mainly because I promised you via our DM setting this up that we'd talk about the new record a bit. And I listened to the new record. It's called Ghosts of New Orleans. It's beautiful, truly beautiful. I actually made my wife listen to it. She loves music, as most people do. But you know, sometimes you listen to music and you're just like, yeah, it's good, but kind of thing. Not trying to sound judgy in any way, but I listened
Right.
to that record and I was like, this is freaking awesome. And I played it for her. She's from New Orleans. So like she was like, this is great. So I think you've got two new fans, guys.
That's
I
awesome.
appreciate
Let's talk about the record. Tell me about the recording process. And I know that you got a grant from the Threadhead Culture, Jazz and Heritage Museum. I think I'm not entirely
Yes,
sure.
Heritage Foundation. Yeah.
You guys can kind of talk about it. But talk to me about how the grant came about. How do bands or artists try and apply for those kinds of things? And what are the stipulations? Like, do you have to, is it just a matter of you get a grant and you're allowed to use that financing to do what you want within reason for making a record? Or do you have to follow certain protocol in order to get the grant to actually sign off?
Well, I mean, I write a lot with John Poppergrove. I had some songs on his records, and he told me about told me about the Threadhead grant and the Jazz and Heritage Foundation grants. And so, they have this, application, and they give grants every year. They have a certain amount of money that they have to give away to various people, and it's kind of a cultural grant in that they want songs that will promote New Orleans culture. That was the kind of thing. We are in an odd situation to where we don't always write about New Orleans like some bands do, or have a style that is just uniquely New Orleans. John definitely goes out for that kind of thing. So anyway, we were both kind of putting together these applications. I was over at his house, and he was doing his, and I was doing ours. And you know, we didn't know what the album was going to be, but I thought, okay, the song "Ghosts of New Orleans," the title track is, Timmie and I and Rick wrote this song, and it was during the pandemic, and it was about everything was shut down, the quarter, everything. So it was like, what happens if the ghosts, they all talk about those ghosts and the ghost, tours and stuff like that. What if they took over? And we tried to make it, a few musical, in like Louis Armstrong and a few others and stuff like that. And so I thought, wow, that's a kind of a unifying thing. We didn't have all the songs picked out for what was going to be on the album, but it was it was something that celebrated the culture of New Orleans and things like that. And so I put that as the title, as the theme that we were going to go through. And so it was, it worked. Both organizations were very enthusiastic, and they gave us grants. The Jazz and Heritage people, they just give you the money. You have to write a report about a year later, and you have to just tell them what happened and maybe show them a few receipts. But they just let you go with doing whatever. With Threadhead, you have to kind of show them receipts and they'll pay you, but they never try to tell you what to do. You deliver the final album to them, either electronically or a physical copy, whatever, and then you fulfill the contract. So it's a fairly simple process as far as like you have to, but you know, it's important to have a concept, like an interesting concept that's going to make those people go, oh, because they listen to all kinds of music, all kinds of ideas, and you know, not everybody can get that. So we're very fortunate to do that. So yeah, it's just it's one of those things.
And you're using if you're recording it in New Orleans and using local musicians, that's, you know, that's always a plus, that you're just injecting and kind of injecting something back into the whole New Orleans music culture to keep it thriving. So
Yeah.
that's part of it too.
And you had said something about the process of recording. You asked that. At this point in time, when we you know, Rick and I kind of got together, and we went through. I literally had about 1,000 songs that we, 800, 1,000 or whatever. So I had this big old list of songs, and Rick and I painstakingly went through not all of them, but a lot of them, you know, and we narrowed it down to about 50. Then I went on over to Timmie, and we narrowed it down to about 30, and eventually we got to 10. But so that was the first process, is kind of like pre-production. What do we want to record? And
I was fortunate enough to miss out on the
on the
first
1,000.
So
And there was
I appreciate y'all doing that.
all the stuff that I started writing. When I started writing country music, the first year, you can just say, I could forget it. So we listened to some of that. It's like, nah, you know, because it was terrible. So, but then basically, so we narrowed it down to that. And then at that particular point in time, the only people in the band was Timmie, me, and Thad Scott, who is our bass player and saxophone player, and writes all the horn arrangements. We didn't have a drummer. But we all knew this guy, Doug Belote, who's like, has done everything.
Yeah.
You know, so we were very fortunate that he said yes to do the project. And so he's just this, you know, for the most of the time, I grew up listening to Billy Joel, and I always loved Liberty DeVito, the drummer of
Amazing drummer.
Yeah. And so I always, you know, in my mind, and I'm sure Timmie has a different point of view, but in my mind, I always wanted somebody to have that aggressiveness of Liberty DeVito. And so Doug is that Doug is, you know, and so we started, you know, we gave him the songs, we had a rehearsal, you know, I could feel it. But then when we got into the studio, it was like, oh,
came alive.
shoot.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, the songs came alive. And a lot of it was because of this energy in Doug, and we of Doug's playing, and we fed off that. Then we, you know, what it's kind of like a kid in a candy store when you're in a studio. If you have the amount of money, we just barely had enough money to do what we did. But basically, if you have the money to do it, you know, we have Thad Scott, who's played with Lena Prima for years, who played with Marcia Ball for years, saxophone, amazing arrangers. He's one of the best arrangers in New Orleans and beyond. And so there were like 2 or 3 songs that were like, yeah, we kind of need a horn section in these. So, and we don't usually have horn sections in any of the other stuff that we come up with. So he was amazing. And, you know, we worked together on what we wanted, and he's so musical. You know, he started out playing the saxophone, and he got into the band originally when I was talking to John, I said, we need a bass player. So well, it's this guy, Thad. He plays saxophone, but he just started playing bass about a year ago. And it's like, when he started playing, he was a little green, but it didn't take him long, because he just
Such a musical.
He does the work,
you know,
you know, and he's musical.
Yeah.
So anyway, it all came together after that. But we had so many different guests, you know, Rex Gregory.
Johnny Sansone.
Yeah, Rex Gregory played clarinet on Ghosts of New Orleans. He had just gotten over pneumonia. And he was coming at, like, the horn section, the other parts of the horn section were already there, already rehearsed. He came in He's like, I don't know if I can do this, guys. So he went in the room and practiced for a little bit, and he knocked it out in one take. And
Of course.
if you listen to hit, it's like, we're old, so we grew up with the icon Pete Fountain, the clarinet player.
Yeah.
He sounds like since it's Ghost of New Orleans, he sounds like the ghost of Pete Fountain.
Yeah.
He just nailed it. And so yeah, we were very fortunate. We had Johnny Sanson playing accordion and harmonica. Who else was guests? We had
John Grow. I mean, John
played
plays,
keys, organ, and keys on
he plays
a good number of the songs.
Yeah.
We also had 3 songs. We with 2 of the songs on the album we recorded in Nashville. So we went to
talk about Mike on Ghost of New Orleans.
And Mike Lemler, who plays with George Porter.
The intro on Ghost of New Orleans.
The intro is on Ghost of New Orleans. He made the song.
Wow.
Yeah. It was us strumming the chords on acoustic, singing it, because we play as a duo quite often, and it was a gig Mark did where I wasn't available, and he got a good friend of ours, Mike Lemler, to just play keys on, accompany him on keys.
Yeah.
And when he started playing this bit on Ghost of New Orleans, and Mike wasn't really that familiar with the song, he just started doing this thing. And Mark's like, that's how the song's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
So that intro is all Mike Lemler and the way he plays keys to that song.
Yeah,
that's so cool, man.
About Nashville, I think.
And we had some songs that we did. There were some country songs, obviously, because I read a lot of country songs. And we had one song that we wrote, Timmie and Rick and I wrote, called Radio Flyer, which is about the little rat wagons and like kind of childhood and stuff like that. So we thought, let's get a Nashville treatment of this. And we got some really great players. A buddy of mine, Mark Lonsway, who does a lot of engineering and he's a musician. He put together the band and it was great. So we had this one marathon day where we recorded everything on 3 songs in an entire day. So it was exhausting and it was inspiring. And Timmie played with the Nashville folks.
Yeah, that was a cool experience.
Yeah,
for me.
That's cool, man.
Just to see that whole work process, it's different.
Yeah.
Definitely different than New Orleans, but
they
both are awesome in different ways.
Yeah.
So it was great. Yeah, and so yeah, we had lots of guests. We kept going. Oh, can we afford all this? Can we afford all this? But we ended up, with the grants and with some of our gig money, we were able to pay for it. So
that's amazing, man. Talk to me about just being studio ready and what advice or tips you could potentially offer listeners who might be gearing up to go to a studio for the first time in regards to what they can do to get the most out of that experience, both from a monetary point of view, because you're paying by the hour or the day,
right?
And then just from you might never get to go to another cool studio like that kind of point of view.
Yeah. We've main thing, you probably know this. I know you're a multi-instrumentalist, but you're a drummer, right?
Yes.
So, getting what we call getting the bottoms down in a real studio is kind of the most important thing, and some basic rhythm tracks. But a lot of things you can overdub, or you can fly. You can not necessarily fly in, but you can do. You don't need a full-blown studio to do. So getting the bass and the drums done right in a real studio is the most important part. That becomes your foundation, your blueprint to build on top of that. So that's kind of what we focus the studio time on, and maximizing those guys' time for bass and drums. And Mark does a rhythm and a scratch vocal, and I do a rhythm track that sometimes I hope I can keep if it comes out good. But the important thing is getting those guys done, and then when we're done with them, we don't need that time in the studio. We can come back and do overdubs with just us. Some things we can, like for John to add keyboard parts, we can fly some stuff over to him, or he can add that
at home by himself. Yeah.
Right. And but some things you have to do in the studio. You want to minimize what you have to do in the studio, and you want to be prepared. And the only thing I'd say about being prepared is do your homework and do some rehearsal.
Yeah.
But don't be too rigid about it, because things, you might decide to tweak the arrangement, or something might come to you in the studio. So you got to kind of know the structure of the song and know what you're going to do, but you also have to be flexible, because I think if you get rattled by little changes, or you're stuck to a certain chart, or real strict about structure, you might be spending more time than you want to.
Yeah.
My thought to add to that a little bit is that, you can't be too structured, but by all means, do your homework. I mean, as I said, we went from 1,000 songs to 50 songs to 30 songs we recorded 13 songs in New Orleans, and 3 songs in Nashville. Ended up being 10 on the album. So it's just like, like however a lot of people have computers or whatever, or phones or whatever. If you have the notes section, if you think, just like I did that, and I had a notebook that I was continually writing. Okay, what is this song? What does this song need? What do we have? Who do we have to? And so it's like this continual thing where you have to plan, because when you're in the studio, the clock's ticking and the money keeps rolling up,
Right.
and it's like,
you want to maximize that.
And so you get the people, and Thad Scott was amazing in that he wrote all of the horn charts. Not only came up with the horn parts, but wrote all the horn charts. And so the guys who could do that, they were just there. They rehearsed it a few times, and with a few little exceptions in some spots, were able to nail it within a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
So, the first album that Timmie and I did, it was a band that was called the Mark Carson Band. It was earlier 2000s. And we went in and we started rehearsing in the studio. I don't even want to remember what we paid. What it cost us.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So you rehearse ahead of time if you can.
I remember
tweaking, not rehearsing in the studio.
Yeah, most definitely. I remember the days, and I'm sure it still exists, but I haven't seen it in years. But I remember the days when you didn't have the option to do home recording and things like that, and you had to go to studios. And it seemed as though almost every legitimate studio had a big digital clock in the control room. And that thing used to freak me out. Like, especially once I got to a point where I was financing projects myself, and you're just like, man, that was like the fastest clock on the planet, right? Like everything else, like, you'd be doing things and you'd be like, man, it's only been like 20 minutes. Studio digital clocks, those things were like money suckers, man.
Be unnerving.
Right.
Okay. Again, possibly a bit of an interesting one. And maybe a little bit like, I suppose educational or boring for some. But talk to me a little bit about song rights. What should songwriters be paying attention to or trying to educate themselves on in regards to knowing about their publishing and their copyright, if you potentially can spread any knowledge here?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult.
I'll let him take this.
It's difficult because there's a whole lot of people writing songs, and I know that there are beginning songwriters that say, "Oh, I don't want anybody to steal my ideas." Dude, everything's been done.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and so my point is, when you start writing songs, you don't have to copyright in the very beginnings, because you're just learning anyway, and more than likely you're going to throw out the first 100 songs you write anyway. But when you get something that you really feel like you need to do something, you need to protect it in some way, shape, or form. The easiest way that I could say is to join a performance rights organization, which is there's 3 of them. There's BMI, there's ASCAP, and there's CSAC. Now, there are good things to recommend any of these. And it doesn't cost that much. But once you get not only a name for, I mean, your name as a writer, but you also can set up your own publishing company. You can start putting your compositions, your songs in that, on that page on the, under your publishing company. So that protects them to a degree. And of course, if you record something, you might want to copyright the entire, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So you might want to copyright the entire album, like as one copyright or whatever. If things get even beyond that, you might have to copyright the individual songs. But basically, when you're just kind of trying to figure it out, but also have, I mean, the phones are the best thing because you can record everything and it's time stamped. So if somebody does something 2 years from then okay, wait, I got this. It's already here. So it's just make sure that you have a record. Make sure that when you do finish a song, do a work tape. Don't. I remember I was writing with these two guys in Nashville. I'd just driven into Nashville, and they were just sitting on the sofa. And one guy was like, "Yeah, let's write a song," and the other guy was like, "I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this." And so, he just started. This guy Chris, this lyricist, he started coming up with ideas. Like, let's write a song like this classic country song. And so we started doing it. I started playing. The other guy still wasn't like. He didn't want to do any of it. He was just sitting on his phone. He was playing on his computer, watching TV, whatever. And so we ended up doing this song. And I was like, okay, we need to do a work tape. And my friend Pete, who was the one who didn't want to do anything, said, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm like, Pete, you're going to be writing another song tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so we didn't do a work tape. 3 weeks later, I was like, do you remember that song? I was like, what song? And so finally we pieced together the song. It eventually got cut by somebody. They did a video. They spent, it was on country radio for like 20 seconds. But basically, I had to dig that song out of the dirt just to basically get that song and then eventually got demoed and then it got recorded. So it's like, okay, yeah. But so you need to document what you do. And that's probably the most important way to protect your songs in the beginning. Afterwards, you can, but the performance rights organizations are very helpful. And if you go as a writer and try to be a writer, like I did in Nashville, you can go visit, like I visited ASCAP, and there was a writer representative who listened to my songs and said, "You suck." The first one did, but then, like basically, I got my publishing deal. I'm with CSAC now. I got my publishing deal because the lady at CSAC became a champion of mine, and she was like, "Okay, you need to go see this publisher," and so I did, and they offered me a deal, and so it's kind of like they can be very helpful to you, There are other organizations that you can deal with, but basically, just make sure you document what you have and it's time stamped in some way.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Timmie, I'm going to let you take the lead on the next one.
Okay.
So, in regards to release strategy, now I don't know if you had one or have one, etc., etc., etc. But it seems like more and more we're living in a very oversaturated world when it comes to streaming, right? Like it comes up on this podcast all the time. Statistically, we've got 120,000 songs being released a day now on streaming. That's not even bringing into play the bots and the AI music that's now starting to become implemented into these platforms. Did you guys have anything special or unusual that you tried to do in regards to the release strategy for your album? And if so, what was it?
Well, Mark was mostly involved in those decisions, but it's interesting because we come from slightly different schools of thought here. And I'm a little old school as far as I love the idea of a collection of songs of an album I like some sort of physical media too. Nobody uses CDs anymore. And I know vinyl's kind of coming back, but I still like the thought of a collection of songs that you can listen to together and sort of figure out what the artists were going through at the time, who played on it, and all that stuff. Because growing up as a musician, listening to your favorite albums, that's kind of how you enjoyed music. So we Mark is at some point was, what's the point of releasing a collection of songs? Everybody releases singles. You can release a single whenever you want. You can sort of build it up. So I think we had a combination of those things. He actually made the decisions and handled that. So I'll let him talk more about that. But
No problem.
if I don't know any secrets or how the world works as far as getting more attention to your singles. I know you can do a pre-release, but I think having a collection and then hitting them with singles and also at the same time maybe some benefit too.
Yeah, I think that what we the not a whole lot of people know who we are. We're local, and we're trying to make it beyond that. But I often have conversations with John, because John was in Papa Grows Funk that went around the world, and he's doing John Papa Grow, his band, and they're playing around the country. He's actually going to the UK in a few weeks. So I can call upon him to say, okay, what did you do in this situation? So the point is you ask those people that have done stuff. I talk to Jim McCormick pretty frequently about, when should things happen. Spotify has their New Music Fridays, so everything has to be released on a Friday. That's one thing you need to understand. And then as much as you can, and we've just kind of are coming around to this, is that basically have little short videos of 20 seconds, 30 seconds of these things, like a little piece from the studio, a little piece of like the song when or in some text that tells you a little bit about what's going on. So I've done a lot of it myself, but I have a guy named Matt Hughes that is brilliant at it. And so he, in the year or so before we actually did the record, we have these. I did a thing called New Music Wednesday, and it's on TikTok, on all the platforms, where I do like a minute's version of a song that I wrote, whether it was cut or not. Well, I just thought it was a good song. But then Monday was story behind the song. So we do the story behind the song. We talk about, I'd said, I got together with these guys and we did this and this. And so those kinds of feeding the beast kind of thing, the social media, was what eventually, when we said, okay, we're coming out with an album, we had, I'm not saying the numbers are huge, because they're not, but basically we had more people listening to this album than anything else. And I think it was all the prep stuff,
having some other content to complement, just sending a link out. Hey, listen to this new song or this new album. It's great having some other content. We live in the short attention span society now, right? You got to grab them with something to make them click another link, which is apparently really hard to do.
It's very difficult.
I didn't intend on ever being doing this. I always hoped somebody else would do it. But, it just, I started working with iMovie, and I'm not an expert, but I can do certain things, and people have responded, and,
it's great, guys.
Sometimes 3 people listen to this songs. We did a 30-second thing of a song of a clip from a live gig, and it had 6,000 views, which is a lot more than we usually get. Yes.
I briefly touched on AI in my previous question. Have you got any thoughts, good or bad? Do you think it's going to be positive or negative for songwriters and musicians? Just general opinions for me both, please.
It's funny. Rick Rooney is the other songwriter of the trio that we write a lot of the songs. He started dabbling in kind of putting in his little guitar riffs or whatever, or putting in like a title, and then the AI would come out with an entire song. And he was playing it for me, and I was like, ooh.
Because you're a songwriter.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it was actually pretty decent. So I'm just like, okay, there's some story going around that there's some guy that did like a whole album full of AI stuff, and he's making money. He released the album. I don't know how much money he's making because, whatever. But like, I think Timmie may feel similarly to me because I'm kind of old school. It's like you physically, and I don't mind anybody using Pro Tools or using drum machines or doing any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
However you create your art is great, but it's just like AI is like, okay, I just wish that, and sometimes I wish it wasn't there. I don't know how it's going to aid someone who actually wants to learn how to write songs.
Yeah.
Because you can just type in something and then, that's just me.
I guess I'm looking at it from me as being somewhat of a technologist because I worked in the IT field forever, but also just looking at how things like this, I mean, it is big, it's huge, but when drum machines came out and loops came out and everyone thought drummers would never work again, or
Yeah.
sequencing and all that stuff. It started out, people were using it a lot, probably getting overused, and then it sort of found its place, but it didn't replace the old, the classic. You're not going to replace an acoustic drum, a guy who knows how to play an acoustic drum set, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think AI, even though it's much bigger and it's much scarier, I think it's going to be the same thing. I think it's going to get overused and it's going to get out of control for a while, and it's going to scare a lot of people. But then it's going to find its niche in the music industry, I guess, good or bad, and maybe some of the things that are super tedious, um, you know, maybe narrowing down 1,000 songs into 50. It could be,
Yeah.
no, I don't know.
You never know, right?
No, I'm just saying finding the applications where it really makes sense and you're saving someone from something that's really monotonous. But
Right.
the creative process is just, I don't, yeah, I guess I struggle with that. But the one thing I say this, but I did work as a data professional in the IT world for government, and there has to be a way for you to really know what's coming from AI and what's not. It's got to be some sort of digital footprint or some way to protect, um, I guess, your image or your likeness, or so that part
Right.
kind of scares me, and hopefully, we'll get a grip on that at some point. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
What's in each of your opinions have been or has been the hardest part about essentially being lifelong musicians?
Well, uh, um, there, I have to back up to a song. There's a Billy Joel song called Rosalinda's Eyes. And the last verse is all alone in a Puerto Rican band, union wages, wedding clothes. Hardly anyone has seen how good I am. Rosalinda says she knows. To me, that encapsulates being a lifelong musician. You are doing a lot of, unless you're extremely lucky. Your name is Lennon and McCartney, or and you hit upon something. Unless you're extremely lucky, a lot of what you're going to be doing is in isolation. You're going to be playing to nobody. You're going to be playing in a band, in a band maybe for some gigs, for some money, and you're going to be playing songs you don't necessarily like to be able to make some money, to be able to pay the rent or do whatever. The climb is constant, and it's always like, when I was a staff writer, it was like, okay, you got this cut. Oh, this is great. This is fantastic. Okay, what are you going to do now? What have you done for me lately? And it's like, so it's the struggle is constant, and you have to be comfortable with that. To me, it's like you have to be comfortable with the anonymity that comes with really doing this, not just as a hobby, being a weekend warrior, but actually doing this, to add, and it's going to, if you do it, no matter at what level you do it, it's going to enrich your life,
Yeah.
you know, but it's just, it's not easy. So,
What about you, Timmie?
I would say just how do you see yourself as a musician?
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the struggle for me. For year over my lifetime at different periods, I stepped away, had a regular job. I've been married, have kids, and grandkids, and there were times when I just told myself, I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a musician. That's just something I dabbled in, but at some point when you realize you still have music going on in your head, no matter what you do, you still have this drive to create something, to dabble, to play around. I had to, as I guess as I got older, I just had to embrace it more and say, no, I am a musician. Just, but I think seeing yourself, of course, you have to put in the work, and you have to spend time and learn your instrument or learn your craft, and keep working at it. And it's, you never master anything, right? You're somewhere in the process, and you just keep working at it, and that's part of the journey. But seeing yourself being able to do it, I think, is as much part of the struggle as putting in the work. So
Yeah.
that's part of it.
All right, guys, I have one last question for you.
okay.
And again, you can either do this from something that was maybe given to you or something you figured out along the way. The question is, what do you feel has either been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to being a musician or a songwriter or being in a band? Or what is something you figured out along the way that you think might serve as good advice for somebody else?
You go.
Put you on the spot there, Timmie.
No,
You
I
do
would just,
it.
I would just say, I mean, I guess looking at it as a guitar player first, because I guess I consider myself a guitar player who writes and sings versus a songwriter who plays guitar. Mark might look at it differently. For him, is um, I, you know comparing yourself to others in when you're looking at these creative endeavors can be somewhat self-destructive. I mean, but depending on how you do it, if you're constantly trying to set some bar or um, measure your progress or your success or your proficiency or whatever it is by comparing yourself to others, um, uh, it it kind of prevents you from seeing that you have your own unique voice and your own spin on things, and there's a lot of you know there's there's some kid on YouTube that can play every guitar lick you ever heard, sometimes better than the guy who wrote the lick. But that so I, I getting into that sort of competitiveness, I don't think is healthy. I think doing whatever work you need to do to get to your version of what you want to do. Your version of you as a musician. I mean, that's kind of what's important. Focus on what's important to you, and not everybody's going to be Jimmy Page, or Eddie Van Halen, but hey, how many other guitar players out there really have something to say and play a lot of cool stuff? And it's the same thing with every part of the craft: singing, songwriting. So I guess that's it for me.
I don't know if anybody ever told me this. Yeah, I think probably people told me this along the way, but I mean, it's like, okay, Timmie's right. The worst thing I do every day is to look at Facebook because it's always about 10 musicians, 10 songwriters or whatever. Oh, I'm playing here. I'm like, shit, we're not playing there. So that does no good. The thing that I continually, and I think probably my wife and people around me, because I don't always practice it, but it's enjoy the process. Because if you don't enjoy the process, then you're going to be not happy, because basically You know, I mean, and there's people that are at the top levels that don't enjoy the process, and they're not happy. They're doing great, good work, but like, what would the whole point of all of us picking up an instrument or a microphone was to try to do something different than the people who just went through school, had a job, and did all that. We wanted to do something different. It's not that, we had aspirations of making it a living, and maybe making, going up to the top. But even if you have a regular job and all that kind of stuff, it's just the a way to enhance your life. But it's not easy. So you have to enjoy the process. And a second thing is enjoy the people that you're working with, because
That's a big one.
we've all been in bands. We've all been in bands where there's just, all right. There was one dick. One guy was a dick. I mean, or one woman who was
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
And so and it's always kind of brought everybody else down. When I was writing songs in Nashville, we talk about these 4-hour staring contests, where like, they're just like, okay, what do you want to write? Okay, we come up with an idea, and it's just like, and then we just sit there, nothing happens. It's like, there was one guy that was so awful, and I don't even remember his name anymore, but he was like, okay, we're gonna sit here, we're gonna come up with the perfect first line, we're gonna sweat and bleed and come up through 75 different permutations of this line, and then we're going to do the same with the second line. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm sitting here going, please get me out of this room. If I had a bomb, if I had a hand grenade, I'd have fucking thrown it in the thing and just the whole thing and start, get out of there. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
It's work, certainly, but it doesn't have to be torturous,
So you gotta balance your work ethic with just enjoying yourself and enjoying the moment, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Mark, Carson, and Timmie Baudier. That was a lot of fun. I can't thank you enough for your time. I wish you guys nothing but success, both with the record and just in life. I think you came across as lovely folks, and I can't thank you enough for your time and your experience and just insight into what you've given my listeners and myself. So all the best with everything. Thank you once again for joining me on the Musicians Mentor podcast, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Peace.
We appreciate you having us.